and welcome to this conversation about on mobility in India. We are seeing an unprecedented growth in investment and ambition in this space, but the real test is how these pieces come together across infrastructure, across safety and behavior, as well as planning. Now let me start with all of you with this one common question, that India is investing heavily in roads, transit systems and EV infrastructure. But when you look at the overall mobility ecosystem today, where do you believe that the biggest gap still exists between ambition and reality? Let me start with you, Alpana.
So 75% of vehicles that are registered are two-wheelers. Okay? We are making expressways where two-wheelers are not allowed. We are making metros which connect centers. So metros are underutilized. Even a city like Delhi, which has the highest utilization, we use less than 50%. If you look at buses, we have about 50,000 buses in the country. It's a ridiculously small number. And about 61% of these buses are in 9 megacities. So, and rural India accounts for about 70% of fatal road accidents, where two-wheelers, smaller towns, these are the only modes of transport. So we haven't, or we aren't creating an inclusive strategy for mobility. We currently have solutions which are very, very urban, very for car owners, for decongesting roads in urban centers, but it doesn't account for the large population of India which is on two-wheelers.
What about you, Dr. Jaffer? Would you like to weigh in on the same?
Sure. So, as she rightly said, the way the network, the highways are growing, the way at which the infrastructure is advancing. If you look at overall highways in India, it is only 4.9% of the entire road network in India. So very small compared to the network. But if you look at the number of road crash fatalities taking place on these highways, it's more than 59%. So it's very clear that while we are doing and investing a lot on infrastructure and trying to reach an ambition of a really good state-of-the-art highways everywhere, we are perhaps not advancing at the same pace when it comes to road safety. And that, until and unless is addressed, I believe that that will remain a big gap. And as she was also mentioning, that it has to be inclusive, and that's the tagline also we see in the summit today also, it has to be inclusive. It can be inclusive only and only if we are designing our roads for the safety of the people, not just for vehicles, but with a human-centric approach. Thanks.
Professor Gupta, I'd like for you to also weigh in on the same.
I think hello everyone. I just want to kind of pick up from where she left. I will go back to National Urban Transport Policy, which came in 2006, which said that you need to kind of move people and not vehicles. And I think in my view, some changes have happened because I have spent almost nearly 4 decades now in this sector. Previous to 2006, we were all preparing plans which hardly had any sense of belonging or any solution to active mobility. Ever since 2006 now, your transport planning approach slightly has undergone a change. There is a sense of provisioning for people with vulnerability, make the transport more inclusive. But I agree with both my colleagues here that while it is all good at planning, at planning stage itself, but it is not implemented in true spirit. And we still find that our whole mobility ecosystem is very vehicle-centric. Probably we always want to optimize time. I think it's because we want to purchase time through faster mobility. But while doing so, we forget that there is a predominant section of society which is outside this domain of time. They are more money saver society. And for them, we need to provide for affordable, inclusive transport system, which I think is still far away. I would put it that way right now. Thank you.
I have this question for you only. In your view, do you think that are Indian cities planning mobility early on, or is it after the congestion happens that the infrastructure starts developing, like after the inefficiency is already set in?
Well, I wouldn't blame our Indian policy planners. You know, there are two school of thoughts actually. The one school of thought says that we provide transport infrastructure ahead of demand. Okay. While the other says that, well, no, you wait for the demand to come and then you plan for transport infra. Most of the Western societies, I mean, I'm talking US particularly, have been very proactive and rather, I would put, they have planned their infra in a very, very great scale, sometimes suboptimally utilized. In developing countries, especially seeing the context, we probably are unable to, in spite of best of efforts, unable to provide the capacity ahead of demand. And so what really happens is that you provide a capacity, there is an induced demand, and then there is another need for enhanced capacity, and you're always chasing the demand. And I probably, because I've been teaching this subject for 3 decades and a half, we always teach that transport is an induced behavior. You don't travel without a purpose, you know. There is a need for traveling. And the need gets created by the land use, we call it, the use to which you have to access. Now that relationship somehow has not been understood in a true sense by our decision makers and project implementers. That is the sad part. So we always are looking for solutions when the problem has come. And by the time it's very, very difficult to actually mitigate. I would put it, the mega cities now, you probably will have to manage rather than creating supply. How long you can create supply in Delhi or Mumbai or Hyderabad, you have to manage, and that probably decision will come at some point of time, but which will be very painful, to accept. Yeah.
So coming to this from a systems perspective, my question to you, Dr. Jaffer, that, while these highways are increasing, the highway network is increasing, right? Yet road safety somewhat remains like a major concern. Do you think safety is still treated as a secondary consideration in infrastructure planning?
I would say that road safety remains an afterthought or a reactive approach more than looking at the planning design part of it, because when we do deep data analysis of crashes that are happening, we find out that many of the reasons for those road crash fatalities are related to engineering. Many are related to enforcement. Many are related to poor trauma care, emergency care. So these deaths were preventable, but because perhaps we missed on certain aspects of engineering in the design stage, therefore we are not able to do it. And our experience at Save Life has shown us that whenever we have tried to bring in the elements of engineering, enforcement, engagement, and emergency care, we have seen significant reduction in road crash fatalities. So when we piloted on Mumbai-Pune Expressway, we were able to see, a significant drop within the first 3 years. We were able to bring the drop by 40%, and now it has gone much more. So seeing that all these elements have to be thought of when we are planning for the infrastructure, and if we don't do that, then all we are trying to do is fix it as a reactive approach. So we are able to introduce new elements as an afterthought. We are able to still curb it, but it's not ideal. As you rightly said, is it secondary? Maybe not secondary, but definitely a reactive approach rather than a proactive thought.
Perfect. And while mobility infrastructure is often discussed in terms of the roads, the changing infrastructure, the network, the public transport, Ms. Parida, my question to you is, why do you think that rider safety, particularly the helmets today, like the adoption, the design, still does not receive enough attention?
So I am choosing to make helmets for women and children. And I'm always asked this question, why women? What's so different about it? It's a very simple thing. Everybody understands that the foot sizes for men and women are very different. So there's no question of making a men's shoe stuffing it and putting it on a woman's foot. Similarly, head sizes, and this is anthropomorphic data for India, head sizes for women are much, much smaller. But there is no helmet maker who believes this is a big enough market, so they've not invested in a mold of a woman's size. It's like the seat belt problem. Right? They're not made to women's sizes. So we've chosen to make molds to women's sizes, and we hear women saying, oh my God, I've never had a helmet that fit me like this. So it's a very simple thing, but it's more than that. I'm going to go beyond helmets. I don't think it's only to do with my industry. I see all these wonderful, sleek, two-wheeler EVs, right? And I don't know if there's anybody from that industry here. And they're so sleek and minimalistic, there is nothing on the seat to hold on to. So, and the seat is a single seat. So you can cram 3 people, 4 people, 5 people on this seat. Now, I remember we grew up, when I grew up, there was this ambassador car, and there would be 5, 6 people sitting in the front. And obviously, there were accidents, so the bucket seats were mandated. I don't understand why on two-wheelers, 2 separate seats are not mandated. It's pretty simple, and something to hold on to. One of the elements of data I have is that pillion riders are more likely to die than riders, but within pillion riders, kids are more likely to die, and within kids, girl children are more likely to die. And we've been trying to figure out why, and one of the hypotheses we have is that since you have nothing to hold on to, the only thing or person you can hold on to is the rider in front. And very often, you know, young girls, 12, 13, 14, they're uncomfortable even holding on to a family member. So it's just bad design, simple things which are bad design.
Talking about design, and again want to come back to the helmet part of it, since currently I think we'll be working on it, I think in near future about the seats. But in terms of helmet, have you seen like a consumer shift or a preference shift in terms of people opting for women-centric helmets?
So there is only one cohort that is opting for good quality helmets, and that is the passion biker, right? The passionate biker, for him or her, it's a culture, it's a subculture, and therefore they wear all the elements of that persona. I think to adopt anything, it has to be a product that you really want to wear. It can't be a mandated, boring, black, dull, lifeless product, right? It has to bring joy to your life. So I think that's really the fundamental thing. When you want adoption, think of behaviors that will get people to adopt. And I think beyond the bikers, there are many other categories, including women's helmets, where design can play a very big role in adoption.
Perfect. And building on to the same, Dr. Jaffer, as highways increasingly become economic corridors supporting freight and commerce, how do you think should India rethink safety standards both for passengers and for commercial movements?
Yeah, so as highways are becoming economic corridors, we have to understand they are not exclusively economic corridors. We still have trucks and buses and cars and village traffic wherever villages are passing, like the highways are passing through villages. It's a mixed traffic or mixed use of those highways, and therefore it's very important that if we are thinking of designing or the future of the economic corridors, we cannot avoid or ignore the fact that it will remain a mixed user. We have to understand, so when we do forensic crash investigations of most of the crashes, we find out that very often the reason for fatality is a rear end collision. Why is it happening? Because some trucker has stopped because of driver fatigue. They did not have a place to stop, so no truck lay-by, no rest stops for the truckers. So on the road, on highway somewhere, they'll just stop and take rest, and some vehicle coming with speed from behind will just hit it. So we have to understand the infrastructure also therefore has to develop according to that need. There will be long distance drivers. How do we look at the fatigue aspects? How do we look at their rest aspects? Also, how do we also advance our emergency care and trauma care on those highways where there will be so many mixed users and crashes will continue to happen, because within the golden hour, if they are able to get medical assistance, their lives can be saved. So it has to be looked from all those aspects.
And Professor Sanjay, do you think that Indian cities still remain too focused on moving vehicles instead of moving people?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. And I think partly we as academic also are to be blamed for it. I'll tell you the simple reason is the science of transport planning, which we probably are one of the first ones to enter in India, SPA. The whole probably the process is actually built around moving vehicles for the larger reason that we assume that the pedestrians are actually localized and their movement is on the neighborhood scale. And when I'm preparing a mobility plan or a transport plan for a city, I'm not really looking at the micro, movements which happen within the neighborhood. And as a result, what really happens is that we probably tend to kind of accelerate or, the investment in the vehicular-centric infra, namely grade separators, flyovers, hardly looking into the pedestrian crosswalks or FOBs and stuff. So this is one thing which probably I think we probably have failed. I must acknowledge because all of us have been traveling abroad, and it's not that the Western world is not motorized, but at the same time they care for the pedestrians and the crosswalks and stuff. So I think this is something which is very, very important. I think we over prioritize, road building, construction activity over, I sometimes say in conferences and workshop, just stop 1 year, major investment in flyovers, just concentrate on clearing your sidewalks, just spend money 1 year only on creating good footpaths and see the change in the mobility. You can walk the entire London, you can walk entire, European major city because the footpaths are so beautiful. So this is something which probably we will have to, and I think you need a champion probably. I must say that until you have a champion who really is passionate about it, somebody like a Bogota mayor who was the champion to push the Bogota agenda, the BRT agenda in Bogota. I think we need champions. I must acknowledge.
Sanjay, I have one thing to add to the payments, which is, and if you can influence this, which is signages. I think the signages in Indian roads are done by people with an IQ in single digits, because it's everything from the height to the distance from where the turn comes to whether it's the left side or the right side to the size of the font. There's a science to it. And, today AI has made that foolproof, that science. So I really don't get it why even newer roads we are still getting the same nonsense.
That's true. And Dr. Jaffer, what would you suggest that, what is that one intervention that could significantly reduce road fatalities?
So I think one intervention, if we talk about zero fatality solutions, which rests on the evidence and data, so anything and everything has to be informed by data, and it's a multi-sectoral approach. So I think with this, what Ministry of Road and Transport and Highways has also launched the zero fatality districts. That the whole theory behind this zero fatality solution is about stopping working in silos, rather all the actors come together and work across the ease to make the road safer. So that's for me one thing that can bring a complete change.
Perfect. And as mobility evolves, we have been seeing a high rise of EV scooters and EV two-wheelers. So, Alpna, my question to you is, how should safety products, again, like your helmets, how do they evolve alongside infrastructure to better serve new patterns of movement?
I think forums like this are very important, where you have multi-sectoral people from different interest groups who are able to come together and exchange. Because I think the fundamental issue, and that's how design thinking happens, the fundamental issue is that there's a silo and everybody is sort of working on a silo. So I think for the helmet industry, it's equally important to work with, if you're solving for safety, to work with the two-wheeler industry. And, even a simple thing like the material that seats are made from. We see kids slipping off. That material has very little traction, and it's a very simple solve, really. But it's these dialogues which are not happening before things go into design. So,
And Professor Sanjay, according to you, what do you think would it take for Indian cities to build a genuinely integrated mobility systems rather than working in silos, just like Ms. Pareda and Dr. Jaffer said?
When you talk about integration, I think there are 3-4 types of integration which normally I think all of us would be aware. The first we call it as a physical integration, which is taking care of all the mobility needs at a particular station or an interchange. I'm talking holistically. So that is the physical part of it, how you reach to a place, whether you are able to reach properly, how you transfer, how you kind of take your, whether you take a metro or a bus or a whatever. So a physical integration. The second is probably the fare integration. And I think all of us have traveled. You've got London Oyster card. You've got so many, common mobility cards which are there, which probably, because let's accept it. Now the time has undergone a change. I'm talking about an era when we were really captive to a mode of transport. So we could wait endlessly because we didn't get choice. Now the generation today doesn't have time. They're actually, they don't mind spending money to purchase time. And that is where they want convenience at the doorstep. So we need to have fare integration. If you can have fare integration across modes, the way we have it in Europe, I think that would be a great saver. The third is the institutional integration. I think there are so many institutions which are looking up into transport sector. And I think we need to have an interface. And that is where UMTA, you must have heard, Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority, which was recommended for all 1 million plus cities to be in place so that that single body can actually coordinate all the transport functions in a city. I think that needs to be implemented. It's 2006 since we said we need UMTA. In fact, let me tell you, SPA, where I teach, we were the leaders, pioneers in UMTA. Way back in '87, we held the first international conference on UMTA. So, and till now we have only 3 or 4 cities which have UMTA. And that too with a very, very little, let's put it, autonomy. So Delhi doesn't have it till today. That's sad part. The capital doesn't have an UMTA. And that is why we see so disjointed kind of operations. One eye doesn't see the other. The metro doesn't see the DTC. The DTC doesn't look into the cluster until you have a chief secretary who probably brings them together. So you need a unified authority. And then you have a digital integration also coming up into it. There is something called mobility as a service, MaaS. So you need to have open source data which can be used by private industry and kind of create solutions out of it. Common timetabling, common services. So I think these 4 kind of integration probably if we have, most of the good urban transport cities, I mean livable, I would put it, London, Singapore, Seoul, some of the good ones, they have all these in places. So I think this is where we probably will have to pick up very fast.
That's actually a very interesting point about, technology and digitization. So I would like to ask all of you from like infrastructure point of view, from consumer point of view, and from policy point of view, that where do you think, like in future, is the biggest opportunity for technology to shape up mobility?
I think huge. Transport sector probably to me is the biggest, let's put it, biggest cake for the AI industry. I mean, there are a lot of works in intelligent traffic management, smart mobility solutions. You have autonomous vehicles coming up slowly. So I think parking management systems already there in place where you have automated parking management. You just have an app and you can book your parking slot. So I think technology-wise, transport probably has a huge, and I'm not only talking about passenger, I'm also talking about freight, logistics part of it. So fantastic. In fact, the first application of intelligent mobility solution actually came in a freight sector and not in passenger. So that's the part of it. So huge opportunity for people who are there. Yeah.
And Dr. Jafar.
Okay, yeah. So I agree with Professor Gupta in terms of the huge possibilities. And I think technology is not just about automation, it's about faster and smarter decisions. Things which were taking ages in terms of surveys, now we have AI cameras and we are able to quickly get the sense, the chalaning, enforcement, everything is going fast with ITMS. Even in engineering, if you say LiDAR is one thing which will give you the entire picture, the movement patterns, everything you're able to quickly capture, make a smarter decision in a quicker way. Even when you talk about emergency care, the GPS tracking of ambulances and where a crash has happened and quickly sending the nearest ambulance. So it's across, we are seeing a huge difference with technology coming in.
I just hope this reaches the government and there's an integration in government departments. I live in Mumbai where, almost the entire city was dug up for concretikaran, as they say. And then in 2 months, those concrete roads are being dug up again because the sewage lines have to be laid and so on. So I think just fundamental integration of different aspects. Whoever owns the road or the surface under it, I think they all need to work together. So.
I think that's also the case with the. Do you want to take this? I think that's also the case with the metro systems, right? Every city is heavily investing in metro systems and large transit projects. But do you think that we are actually paying enough attention to what happens beyond the stations, such as feeder connectivity is there, accessibility is there, pedestrian activity, again, it's there. So I would want to know all of your thoughts around the same. Would you like to start, Ms. Parada?
Yeah, I think that's this, we all know the last mile connectivity is really, really poor. Forget last mile connectivity, Mumbai had this famous case of 2 different contractors building 2 different bridges and they didn't connect, they were off. And surely while they were building, they could have seen that, there was this huge gap in between. So I think we as a society don't work together. We work separately and it's a cultural issue which is much larger. It probably needs thinking, which comes back to design thinking, which is so holistic as a way of life. So.
Yeah, similar to that, what Professor Gupta was also saying, institutional integration is very important, and the biggest challenge remains the silos working from main road to the legs in the smaller lanes, whose jurisdiction it is in. So sometimes you see bridges being constructed a point and beyond that it's not their jurisdiction, so they'll stop there. So we have all those strange things happening because not just culturally, I think structurally, systems also are such where we are still in silos, and that's where it has to come together. At government level, if once the systems are integrated, it's one area, one authority under which everybody who's responsible comes. That's the way to address it.
I think, it's extremely important for any metro system to be operationally successful. It has to have a good first and last mile. I think Delhi probably, by and large, is doing okay. There are a lot of effort. I know Director Operations, DMRC. There are a lot of effort happening in-house by which they are integrating their first and the last mile. They have the auto rickshaw, e-auto rickshaw tied up to their system. They started the DMRC feeder bus, which was not a very good successful experiment, but nevertheless. But what I'm just trying to say here, Delhi, being such a large city, we are almost 350 lakhs now. And we have a network of 390 odd kilometers, something close to 290 stations. We move around almost 48 lakh people every day. So it has to be successful. But let's talk about cities which are not big as Delhi. I'm leaving for the time being Bangalore and Mumbai, which eventually will also become successful because of the dense corridor. But what happens to cities which don't have that kind of demand? I think that is where I'm not very sure whether the first and the last mile itself will do the business, because you need to have the demand to move on a metro. So what probably we need to be very clear, is there a demand, genuine demand to move on a metro? And if there is a demand, then you need to have the first and the last mile. I think and I think I always say to my students, sometimes these auto rickshaw fellows are more intelligent than us as planners, because they know that which station you have demand and which station you don't have demand. So you kind of, they line up on the stations where there is a demand. Yeah.
Perfect. And that brings me to my final question that if India gets its mobility right by 2030, what will be the most visible change in the everyday life of people and businesses across the country? Let's start with you, Ms. Farida.
Well, I just hope for decongestion, low pollution, better AQI. It's a hope one lives for. That's why we're going through all the pain of now that we are seeing in the infrastructure.
Dr. Jafar?
I think the most visible change would be where road safety will not be a second thought or not be an option or add-on. It'll be part of it, and people moving on the road will go with the trust that they'll be safe and they'll be returning home. The focus will be more on human safety than on faster vehicles.
And Professor Gupta?
It's quite a difficult question because 2030 is just round the corner. I don't see, I'm not very sure, I'm slightly skeptical. 4 years is not a very long time to kind of anticipate 2030. Had it been 2040, 35, probably one could have taken a guess. But I think EV penetration, probably the adoption will grow faster, particularly amongst two-wheelers. I'm not sure about cars per se. That is one thing. I wish the pedestrian walkways will probably become more cleaner, encroachment free, so that people can walk. The sidewalks will look more prettier, I think, for this thing. And I think we will have a lot of intelligent mobility solutions coming in. So you might have apps coming in where you don't have to look for parking. You will be advised what time of the day you have to move to a shopping area, whether you can defer your trip by another 2 hours, or I probably also assume the shopping probably will go around till 12 o'clock in the night to stagger your traffic congestion. So you can shop at 12 in the night. There'll be services. In Delhi, probably I feel there'll be more 9-meter buses. They look more prettier. So you'll have good number of buses where people can move together safely. And I think safety. I am very, very disappointed with Delhi Traffic Police. Absolutely very, very poor management. I've been here I've spent nearly 4 decades sitting in ITO where I teach, and I know the officers, Dr. Kiran Bedi, I know the officers who have reigned Delhi and controlled Delhi, and Delhi is now not being managed properly. I wish there was good traffic management, there was discipline, the two-wheelers were supposed to, I would want to see the pillion rider mandatorily wearing a helmet, which is not there now. So lot of these small things, if it comes, and obviously AQI, I'm just praying AQI will probably be around below 100. High hopes. Thank you.
I feel if that parking app that Professor Sanjay just spoke about comes to life, I think most of Delhi would be uncongested. And to conclude the same, I would just say that moving ahead, just like all our speakers said, that it can only work out for India is only when the infrastructure, the government policies, as well as the consumer safety comes together and stops working in silos. Thank you so much for joining me on this panel. It was a lovely conversation.